Hello everyone. This is Dr. Shivaji Sargar, and today we are going to speak on a very well-known Indian writer, Suniti Namjoshi, and the work to which this session is devoted is Glass Coffins. We will be talking about glass coffins, particularly from a feminist and post-colonial perspective. Suniti Namjoshi, born in 1941 in India, who has established herself as a significant voice in feminist literature. Her writing, which often straddles the boundary between poetry and prose, reflects her lived experiences as a woman of color, navigating various intersections of identity, including gender, race, and sexuality. A post-colonial feminist writer, Suniti Namjoshi's work critiques patriarchal structures and colonial legacies while emphasizing the importance of reclaiming marginalized voices. One of the most notable aspects of her writing is her use of fables and allegories. The fable, a genre traditionally associated with moral lessons and anthropomorphized animals, becomes in the hands of Suniti a tool for political and social critique. Namjoshi's fables, such as those in Feminist Fables that was published in 1981, they challenge dominant paradigms, offering alternative perspectives that foreground the voices of women and other marginalized groups. In this sense, we can say that Suniti Namjoshi's work is often described as subversive, as it seeks to deconstruct familiar narratives and power structures from a feminist and post-colonial perspective. The fable that we are going to talk today is Glass Coffins. And this Glass Coffins is a part of her collection of feminist fables. This fable reflects her distinctive style of subverting traditional literary forms and narratives. This tale, though very brief one, serves as a metaphorical exploration of themes such as gender equality, societal oppression, and the invisibility of marginalized voices. Glass Coffins, we can say, reimagines the Snow White tale by blending classic fairy tale elements with modern themes of autonomy, identity, and technology. This short, layered fable critiques the restrictions of societal expectations, gender roles, and artificial constructs that shape one's identity. Suniti Namjoshi here uses symbolic language, a subversive narrative structure, and complex themes to urge readers to question what it truly means to break free from imposed roles and confront one's authentic self. Through metaphor and narrative, Namjoshi invites the readers to explore the challenges of self-identity amidst confining social norms. By examining these elements, we as readers gain a deeper understanding of the story's critique of traditional gender roles, societal constraints, and the individual's struggle to define their own identity. Glass Coffins, thus we can say, becomes more than a fairy tale retelling. On the contrary, it serves as a powerful reflection on the search for autonomy in a world where identities are often shaped by external forces rather than personal choice. In this particular fable, Suniti Namjoshi tries to reinterpret the classic fairy tale structure by using language and narrative style that challenge traditional storytelling norms. What she does here is, instead of following the familiar linear path seen in conventional fairy tales, where a protagonist moves from hardship to a resolved ending with a moral lesson, Suniti and her approach is sparse, fragmented, and ambiguous. This shift creates a sense of tension and introspection, encouraging readers to question what is real versus what is artificially constructed. Through this style, Namjoshi draws attention to the deeper issues of identity, autonomy, and societal constraints. A central symbol in this particular story is the glass coffins, containing Snow White and the prince. In traditional tales, glass coffins often represent purity and preservation, keeping characters like Snow White in a state of idealized innocence and beauty. Namjoshi, however, subverts this image by depicting the coffins as symbols of entrapment rather than protection. Snow White and the prince are depicted as pretty marionettes in cellophane. Namjoshi, however, subverts this image by depicting the coffins as symbols of entrapment rather than protection. Snow White and the prince are depicted here as pretty marionettes in cellophane wrappers, waiting to live. This phrase not only evokes a sense of lifelessness but also hints at the artificiality and commodification of these characters, as if both of them are merely objects for display rather than living beings with agency. The term cellophane wrappers implies that they are packaged like consumer goods, valued only for their external appearance rather than for any personal qualities or potential for self-determination. This imagery of preservation as entrapment serves as a powerful commentary on societal expectations and constraints. By keeping Snow White and Prince encased in glass, the story suggests that individuals are often confined by society's demands on how they should look, how they should act, and how they should exist. In the traditional Snow White narrative, the heroine's beauty and her innocence are celebrated virtues. However, in this story, these traits become the very factors that restrict her, trapping her in a state of passivity and helplessness. Namjoshi, we can say, thus critiques the social ideals of perfection, purity, and heroism, pointing out that these ideals can become as restrictive as physical cages. Furthermore, Namjoshi's fragmented minimalist language highlights the internal struggle for identity and agency within rigid societal boundaries. This spare prose forces readers to confront the emptiness and artificiality surrounding Snow White and the prince, leading both of them to question the value of a life defined solely by appearance and societal ideals. Namjoshi's use of ambiguity invites the readers to fill in the gaps, encouraging them to reflect on how societal roles and expectations can reduce individuals to mere caricatures of themselves. In this fable, Suniti Namjoshi reinterprets the classic fairy tale structure by using language and narrative style that challenge traditional storytelling norms. Instead of following the familiar linear path seen in conventional fairy tales, where a protagonist moves from hardship to a resolved ending with a moral lesson, Namjoshi's approach is sparse, fragmented, and ambiguous. This shift creates a sense of tension and introspection, encouraging the readers to question what is real versus what is artificially constructed. Through this style, Namjoshi draws attention to the deeper issues of identity, autonomy, and societal constraints. A central symbol in the story is the glass coffins containing Snow White and the prince. In traditional tales, glass coffins often represent purity and preservation. Through this narrative, Namjoshi redefines the fairy tale format, transforming it from a simple moral story into a complex meditation on identity and freedom. By subverting traditional symbols and using an unconventional narrative style, Glass Coffins becomes a powerful critique of the ways in which societal norms and expectations can confine individuals, reducing them to objects rather than allowing them to be fully realized individuals. Suniti Namjoshi introduces a modern twist to her fable by reimagining the seven dwarfs not as traditional miners but as cybernetic experts and wise wiremen. In classic tales, the dwarfs represent hard-working natural labor, saving and sheltering Snow White with their unmechanized industry. But here in this story, these dwarfs become agents of technology, attempting to trigger the dream with their expertise. This transformation reflects a critique of how technology and mechanization shape and sometimes confine lives, trapping individuals in roles that are dictated externally rather than being self-chosen. In this reimagined role, the dwarfs serves as a metaphor for the invasive role of technology in shaping personal identity and agency. Their function isn't nurturing or supportive, as in traditional fairy tales, but it is manipulative. These dwarfs attempt to trigger the dream, implying that they engineer and control rather than allow for organic growth of the people or their self-discovery. Namjoshi uses this role change to question how modern society, with its heavy reliance on technology, often prioritizes conformity and productivity over individual self-actualization. By positioning the dwarfs as cybernetic experts, Namjoshi critiques a world in which technology, social structures, and cultural norms reduce the people to managed roles, stripping away their autonomy and suppressing true individuality. The dwarf's goal of triggering the dream raises further questions about consciousness and reality in Namjoshi's fable. Snow White and the prince exist in a dreamlike liminal state, neither fully alive nor fully dead. This suspension evokes the artificial limbo technology often imposes, creating an illusion of life that prevents people from experiencing reality authentically. In many ways, this dream state mirrors modern society's immersion in digital simulations and societal expectations that distance people from their genuine selves. The dream becomes a symbol of a manufactured life, one shaped not by the individual desires or choices but by social standards and external pressures. In reimagining the dwarfs as cybernetic agents tasked with managing this dream state, Namjoshi critiques the way technology and social norms can hold people captive in prescribed roles. Rather than representing a nurturing natural industry, these cybernetics experts embody the artificiality of lives constructed and controlled by forces outside the self. So we can say this particular fable suggests that individuals are often caught in a dream of expectations, roles, and social definitions that prevent them from achieving real autonomy or authentic experiences. To truly live they must awaken from this dream and break free from the external scripts imposed upon them. Through this reinterpretation, Suniti Namjoshi uses technology as a metaphor to highlight the tension between self-identity and external control. So it can be seen that in Suniti Namjoshi's world, Snow White and the prince are preserved in a state dictated by technology's hold over them, and the cybernetic experts act as guardians of this enforced stasis. The story, we can say, thus critiques how technology and by extension the society can dominate individuals, reducing them to passive entities rather than autonomous beings with the power to shape their own lives. Namjoshi's portrayal of the seven dwarfs as cybernetic experts shifts the fairy tale narrative, positioning it as a commentary on the modern condition. By emphasizing the artificial control exerted by technology and social norms, Namjoshi raises questions about the ways individuals can become trapped in roles or identities not of their own making. The fable suggests that only by breaking free from these dreams of externally imposed expectations can individuals pursue genuine autonomy and self-discovery. So this fable, Glass Coffins, ultimately serves as a critique of how modern life through technology and rigid social roles often distances people from their true selves, challenging the readers to reflect on the forces shaping their own identities. In traditional fairy tales, gender roles are rigidly defined, with female characters often portrayed as passive and in need of rescue, while the male characters are active and heroic. In this fable, Suniti Namjoshi subverts these conventions as well, giving Snow White the agency to control her own destiny, while the prince is rendered impotent and lifeless. This reversal challenges the reader's expectations and critiques the passive roles historically assigned to women in classic narratives. Snow White's first act of agency is her decision to cough up that apple, symbolizing her rejection of the role as the helpless poison princess. In the traditional tale, she is a passive victim, reliant on a prince to save her. Here, however, Snow White consciously chooses to liberate herself, demonstrating a desire for independence and self-determination. Snow White's subsequent actions, commanding herself to break through the glass and moving toward the prince, represent her journey towards self-empowerment. Yet, Namjoshi leaves this journey incomplete, implying that autonomy is an ongoing struggle rather than a singular triumphant act. This ambiguity suggests that empowerment is a continuous process with moments of hesitation and unresolved aspirations. Namjoshi's portrayal of the prince further disrupts conventional gender roles. Rather than being the young, vigorous hero who rescues the princess, here the prince is described as having snow white hair and is ultimately revealed to be a king who died in the sleep. This aged, inert figure undermines the archetype of the heroic male savior, suggesting that waiting for external rescue is futile. By depicting the prince as lifeless, Namjoshi critiques the idea that a woman needs a man to define or complete her. Instead, the narrative implies that Snow White's journey is uniquely her own, one that she must navigate without relying on outdated ideals of romantic salvation. The imagery Namjoshi employs here helps to underscore these themes of self-reliance and transformation. The glass Snow White shatters symbolizes societal expectations and traditional roles that confine her. By breaking through, she symbolically rejects these constraints and begins to craft her own path. However, Namjoshi's choice to end the story without a clear resolution implies that breaking free is not a simple linear process. Snow White's independence is portrayed as something she must continually strive toward, embodying the complexities of redefining identity within a restrictive framework. In this fable, Namjoshi explores existential and psychological themes focusing on agency and the search for identity. The glass coffins symbolize barriers that keep individuals detached from the real world, creating a space between life and death, consciousness and unconsciousness. Encased in glass, the characters are in a state of potentiality, unable to fully engage with life. This entrapment suggests a separation from reality, as if they are frozen in place, distanced from authentic experiences. Snow White's repeated commands to herself, cup up that apple and break through the glass, reveal an inner struggle for both literal and symbolic self-liberation. These imperatives act like mantras, reflecting her need to seize control of her own body and destiny. Yet, Namjoshi's ambiguous ending leaves Snow White in a moment of hesitation, with the suggestion that she might still be trapped within herself. Her pause before the idea of dreaming further raises questions. Has she achieved genuine freedom, or has she simply transitioned from one form of confinement to another? Her pause before the idea of dreaming further raises questions. Has she achieved genuine freedom, or has she simply transitioned from one form of confinement to another? This unresolved conclusion emphasizes the complexity of liberation. While breaking free from existential barriers is vital, confronting one's own inner conflicts and uncertainties presents an equally challenging task. Namjoshi suggests that true autonomy isn't merely about escaping societal constraints, but also involves the difficult process of navigating internal struggles. Through this existential exploration, this fable, Glass Coffins, offers a nuanced perspective on freedom, showing it as a continuous journey rather than a single triumphant act. This fable can also be reinterpreted as a feminist allegory. It also carries significant post-colonial themes. The image of the glass coffin functions as a potent metaphor for the experience of the colonized subject. Much like the women trapped within the coffins, colonized peoples are rendered hyper-visible under colonial rule. While the glass coffin can be reinterpreted as a feminist allegory, it also carries significant post-colonial themes. The image of the glass coffin functions as a potent metaphor for the experience of the colonized subject. Much like the women trapped within the coffins, colonial peoples are rendered hyper-visible under colonial rule. Their existence is constantly under the scrutiny of the colonizer's gaze, yet they are deprived of political agency, autonomy, and self-determination. This paradox of visibility coupled with powerlessness underscores the oppressive nature of colonialism, where the colonized are constantly seen but denied the ability to act on their own behalf. The breakdown of communication between the women in the coffins further amplifies post-colonial concerns, especially regarding cultural fragmentation. Colonialism often divides colonized population along lines of language, ethnicity, geography and social class. These divisions prevent the formation of a unified resistance, fostering disarray and weakening the ability of colonized peoples to come together for collective action. The inability of the women to communicate in the fable mirrors the way colonial power structures fragment social cohesion and prevent solidarity, leaving the colonized in a state of disempowerment. Additionally, the glass coffin serves as a metaphor for the post-colonial condition. Even after the formal end of colonial rule, many formal colonies remain ensnared in economic and political dependency. Just as the women in the coffins are trapped by invisible barriers, post-colonial nations are constrained by global systems of power that perpetuate inequality and exploitation. These nations may be politically independent, but they are still subjected to the lasting effects of colonialism, which continue to hinder their full autonomy and self-determination. The glass coffins, therefore, symbolizes the ongoing struggles of post-colonial states unable to fully break free from these systemic structures of the glass coffin, therefore, symbolizes the ongoing struggles of post-colonial states unable to fully break free from the systemic structures of global domination. In glass coffins, Namjoshi reimagines the fairy tale form to explore modern questions of identity, freedom and self-realization. Her fable presents a powerful allegory of contemporary struggles where individuals are confined by societal expectations, technological influence and constructed identities. Snow White's partial awakening hints at the beginning of self-discovery, but her hesitation and the open-ended conclusion suggest that the journey to true selfhood is filled with ambiguity and challenges. By merging fairy tale motifs with themes of autonomy, technology and existential uncertainty, the writer underscores the complexities of liberation in a world shaped by external pressures. The fable Glass Coffins reminds the readers that true freedom involves not only breaking visible barriers but also confronting the deeply internalized limitations that restrict personal growth. Through her innovative take on a classic narrative, Namjoshi invites readers to question the roles and stories they inherit and to strive for a more authentic understanding of identity beyond imposed norms. The fable ultimately challenges us to rethink what it means to be free in a modern, constrained world. So, to conclude, we can say this fable by Suniti Namjoshi invites the readers to consider our lives beyond the expectations imposed by society and the inherited narratives that often dictate our choices. It encourages us to embark on a journey of self-discovery where we can seek out our true identity and experience a sense of personal freedom. The story pushes us to question what are the visible and invisible barriers that shape the paths we choose. These barriers, often rooted in cultural norms or personal fears, can limit our potential if we don't examine and challenge them. As you delve into this narrative, take it as an invitation to look deeper into the assumptions and roles you may unconsciously accept. Consider how much of your life is shaped by tradition and societal pressures, and reflect on the ways you can redefine these influences to align with your authentic self. True freedom involves not only challenging external restrictions but also conquering the internal limits we place on ourselves through doubt or fear. So, students, let this fable inspire you to find your unique voice, unafraid to question, grow, and pursue what it truly means to live freely in today's very complex world. Embrace resilience and the courage to evolve beyond constraints, stepping fearlessly into your own power. All the best. Thank you very much.